So obviously, this has been one of the most exhausting news cycles to live through in modern times. And if you've been on TikTok at all in the last 14 days or so, you've started to see people start to dig in on this idea that we are living through a media war. They say info war, but I don't want to talk about that fucking guy. That because of the severity of what's going on in Gaza, it is absolutely important to make as much content as possible to spread awareness of what this is. And you've seen it manifest in really positive ways. There's a watermelon filter on TikTok that, when used, all of the proceeds go to victims in Gaza. There's been robust discussions like Piers Morgan and Bassem Youssef. I don't like Piers Morgan, but that's one of those moments where, hey, people are actually listening to each other and trying to have a conversation about this. But with that, there are some issues about a media war and a media landscape that we have that a lot of people don't understand. And we've learned a lot of lessons over the last 8 years with a lot of media wars that we don't seem to remember as they happen. It is very easy for activism to get co-opted and a lot of times for movements to get destroyed because of a lot of these pitfalls. So I do want to talk a little bit about media wars and backlash campaigns and how all of this stuff plays out, because a lot of righteous, important causes can get buried and undercut just because of some stupid bad faith actors and a media landscape that can blindside you. And let's start with how a media war actually operates. We're going to break this down to a couple different steps. There's awareness, recruitment/funding, elevated awareness and distribution, counter arguments, and iterations. These aren't technical terms, but I'm breaking these down in a way that makes sense. And by the way, you can probably implicitly understand a lot of this. There's been a lot of media wars over the last 8 to 10 years. A lot of times with popular culture, like The Last Jedi or The Last of Us 2, and even important social movements like the George Floyd protest. That was absolutely a media war. Every election turns into a giant media war for 12 fucking months. But anyway, let's break these down and break down the steps. So number one is awareness. Whenever you have a cause, like a problem that needs to be solved or a movie that you fucking hate, a lot of times the first and most crucial step is to spread awareness about how important this thing is. And that comes in the form of content, of tweets, of forum posts, of constant repetition of the thesis of what is going on. And much of this is just designed for one thing, to grab your attention away from every other thing that is going on. And so much of the language that's used is very spiky or inflammatory or intense. Defund the police is an example. It's a striking phrase that most people are like, hey, whoa, what do you mean by that? Which drives them to a conversation of the actual material things of what's behind the movement. Defund is very nuanced in that definition. And that's by design. This is a tactic that's been used by civil rights groups since the 1960s. It's a core tenet of activism because a lot of times it's very hard to get any share in a media cycle. So that's step one, spreading awareness, which is good. It's a very positive thing. You need to do that initially. And then all of a sudden you have recruitment/funding. People start to join the movement, adopt the hashtag, start to retweet with their own stories and their own iterations on it. People start GoFundMes if it's a cause that needs money. All of a sudden there's a large blossoming of explanation of this cause that people need to see and talk about. And you start to get a groundswell of momentum going. And again, you're building awareness, but you're also building infrastructure towards your movement. At a certain point, your cause and the understanding of your cause is there. It's reached the mainstream. A lot of public figures and celebrities who, if they weren't passionate about the cause initially, but read about it, start to join. They start to make statements. They start to sign letters. They start to voice their support on the Tonight Show or fucking in whatever thing they're promoting. People who are otherwise not very political or not very media savvy start to mention it because they've just heard it in the periphery. And again, this is all good so far, right? For the most part, this is all solid. And here's the issue, because that's about as far as it fucking goes. At this point, we go to step 4. And this is kind of what I want to talk about. And all of those other things, the goal is still awareness. You want to get people aware of what's going on and tell them about this thing that they didn't know that they need to pay attention to. And what happens then is the people who don't like that argument or don't like that cause that you have develop a counter argument. And sometimes that counter argument isn't really a counter to what you're saying. It's a fucking lie. Or it's a straw man. It's built to paint the person making the argument as an unreliable narrator. They'll take a phrase or they'll take an idea or they'll take one argument and they'll straw man or blow up that argument to say, hey, this actually means something horrible or terrible, or this person actually wants to eat babies. This actually means that this person wants to sacrifice you to Cthulhu or some other shit. Doesn't matter if it's true or not. They'll conflate those arguments. And this will be effective because everybody's worried about being duped or being fucking taken for a ride. And the issue there is that doesn't get addressed because it's so ridiculous. Like, why would you believe this lie? This person's just trying to impugn and not have a conversation. They're straw manning. So they've taken your campaign for awareness and the things you're saying, and they've attached this connotation to them that's super negative, that actually fucks you over and makes you look bad. And they're really effective at spreading that message. Now, the way you deal with this is you iterate on your argument and you go into more substantive detail. But the problem is everybody just stays at awareness, like people don't know what the argument is, and they keep repeating it while these people keep deflating the talking points and creating talking points of their own. And all of a sudden, you have two divergent conversations going on, one that's in bad faith, and all of a sudden the discussion dies. You don't really get anywhere. This is so significant because it kills so many movements and so many things. It's so bad. I'll give you an example that's not a world event. The Last of Us 2 was a game that came out in 2020. And when it came out, it was insanely controversial. Where certain phrases or certain things you like or certain talking points you might relate to, if you said them, it was easy to classify who you were, and you were shouted down immensely by whatever side disagreed with that talking point. And it immediately divided and polarized entire communities. All of a sudden, there was no way to reasonably discuss the game and break things down in a way that was conducive and that was healthy. If you like the game's LGBTQ representation, oh my God, you don't care about story or plot. You just care about gay people in video games. You're like Kathleen Kennedy. If you dislike the repetition of the game or the tone, actually, you're anti-LGBTQ. Another game that was like this was Hogwarts Legacy. And now, I'm not at all criticizing the campaign against Hogwarts Legacy. People said that supporting J.K. Rowling hurts trans people. There is a reasonable discussion to have about that. There's a reasonable discussion to talk about an artist who has horrible opinions, but has made this property that a lot of people are attached to. That is an important discussion to have. We didn't have that discussion because of how the language was codified and used. And all of a sudden, all reasonable takes about this game became unreasonable because as soon as you said something, it triggered a rubric in your head about how to feel about that person and the imperfect morality of whoever was saying it. And again, I'm not even talking about the anti-trans things or the anti-Semitic things in that game. I'm talking about just talking about anything. That is what happens in a bad media war. It destroys discussion and it destroys progress towards finding a solution. It is meant to obscure everything so bad faith actors who are really good at derailing discussions can feed their agendas to however they want. And now let's talk about Israel and Palestine. Well, there have been many really, really positive strides, like the TikTok filter or that wonderful conversation between Bassem and Piers. This discourse has been poisoned. Multiple different phrases are used as trigger words to mean something materially different. And sometimes you don't even know where the origin is. On Sunday, I talked about from the river to the sea, a phrase that has sparked a lot of debate. Is it emancipatory or is it an anti-Semitic slogan for Hamas? In my comment section, which by the way, for the most part, was incredibly civil and incredibly kind in discussing this issue, multiple people gave different accounts of where it came from. And when I looked it up, actually, nobody was really correct. The phrase has been used by both Israel and Palestinians over time for different things. Now, obviously, a lot of people have very charged opinions about that phrase. And that is a discussion that should be had. Who gets to own it? Anti-Semitic terrorists or people who are asking for emancipation? Who gets to claim it? Many people feel ceasefire means let them keep the hostages. Many people feel ceasefire means just stop bombing civilians. But ceasefire and no ceasefire are two phrases that inspire a lot of controversy. Multiple phrases in this have been commodified and used to signal whatever side you're on. For example, let's say you say free Palestine or free Gaza. You're arguing because you don't want kids bombed, you think Netanyahu is a terrible person, and you also believe that the proportionality is unjust. You condemn Hamas, 100%. You condemn Hamas, you think the terrorism is wrong. However, somebody goes on TikTok and sees this.
Through a Holocaust, and then they turned around and did the same thing to Palestinian people. The people that are committing the current genocide are claiming Judaism as their religion, as their ethnicity, as their race, whatever you want to call it. So that's what I'm going to say. Don't separate yourself. Don't separate yourself.
That is fucked. And all of a sudden, somebody else with bad faith latches onto that, and now your whole movement is defined by this. Now, there are robust political movements that can defend against that, but we're still focused on awareness. We're just trying to tell people this is happening. All of a sudden, your argument has been strawmanned by somebody who's anti-Semitic. Clearly, this guy does not represent the majority of people calling for a ceasefire. And listen, clearly, there are plenty of people who are trying to split the difference and everything like that, who aren't trying to excuse what Israel's doing, but just don't know how to deal with the anti-Semitism that's going on. 100%. I'm not trying to both sides this. I clearly have said how I feel about things on multiple episodes, but the breakdown of communication is drastic. The fact that one word or one phrase or one point triggers a litany of things you can strawman and leave the conversation with is terrifying, because if there is a solution to be had, it comes from expressing the concerns and trying to work through how to figure this out. Again, the most robust discussion on this is Piers Morgan and Bassem Youssef. They did listen to each other. There's plenty of times where Piers falls back on talking points, but Bassem entertains it and talks with him. And there are plenty of times where Bassem brings up stuff that would make Piers lash out in fear, and Piers listens and concedes. And I fucking despise Piers Morgan, but he did the right thing there. Many of us want to ignore optics because we feel the morality or the truth of our statement will push through. But we live in a world that doesn't want that to happen. You're not just fighting with your morality, you're fighting against hundreds of thousands of dollars that are built to destroy your argument. So when you are in a media war, it is an incredible responsibility to be smart in how you play. If this is a fight, if this is a battle between good and evil, evil isn't stupid. Evil's fucking smart, dude. Evil does a lot of crazy shit. Do you think Sauron was stupid, man? Sauron fucking figured that shit out. Motherfuckers were blindsided, like, oh shit, fucking Sauron. But you have to be more nuanced in how you push for reform and how you figure things out. And unfortunately, with the current state of social media, it's very hard. It's very hard to do that. So I am pleading with everybody who watches this video, speak your mind, talk about this stuff, make sure the conversation is happening. Even talk shit to a few bad faith actors, but you have to understand that it's not just about making as much content as you can and spreading awareness. It's not just about quote retweeting and dunking on people. It's about making sure that your argument is clear and concise. And I will give you one other example, the abortion movement. Since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, abortion has had one of the strongest movements at telling people, hey, this is fucked up. Much of the time, pro-life politicians have fallen back on the same talking points. They're still focused on awareness and trying to be like, hey, this is actually what my argument is. People know the argument. They're focused on this side of it. And abortion activists have been incredibly smart on pushing that forward and really making some big things happen. The reason Ohio was such a success is they didn't get bogged down by the straw man arguments. They talked about how important it is, how effective it is, what can happen. You have to help improve the messaging. You have to work on it. And the people that we know who were on the right side of history, who fought these battles, who did make meaningful changes, they could be radical, they could be outspoken, but they were effective. And every single time the conversation continued, it didn't stop. So keep the conversation going. That's my show for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments. Again, I'm not trying to tell you to not speak up. Always speak up, but don't fall for the media war grift. Stay safe. It's an exhausting cycle. But anyway, that's my show. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see y'all soon. Let's go.